Hello and welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. It's November 18th, 6:30 p.m. I invite everybody to rise and join Council in O Canada. Thank you. Please be seated. In 1820, Indigenous people here began welcoming settlers from all over the British Empire. Soon, Oakville people were helping Black people escaping from the United States to settle here too. Today, our Indigenous founding partners are still here enjoying this land with us. Indigenous people live with us as neighbors and friends. Our Indigenous white and Black settlers created a community with an attractive degree of harmony and prosperity. In 1857, Ontario recognized Oakville as a town. At Town Hall, all of these years later, we fly the flag of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation beside the flags of Oakville, Ontario, and Canada. We fly our flags together to acknowledge our origins. The livability we are creating attracts people from all over Canada and the world. We offer newcomers a warm spirit of welcome. We offer everyone our founding story so everyone knows what we are part of. We feel sorrow and distress for acts of racism and intolerance around the world, including here at home. We want our future to be equitable and inclusive for everyone. The path of truth and reconciliation can unite us all. Please keep well, stay safe, and let us on Council know of any chance to be helpful to you and yours. Please let us know anytime you can help increase Oakville's harmony, prosperity, and livability. Madam Clerk, we have no regrets this evening. We are all here. And Council, do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, there are no declarations. Council, we have a long agenda. Let's see how much of this we can get through in a quick way. We have 9 sets of minutes to approve. Has anybody found anything they'd like to correct, or can I have a mover and seconder for the minutes? Councillor Knoll and Councillor Shea, any objection? There being none, the minutes are approved. We have no public presentations. We have standing committee reports, 3 of them being the minutes of the Budget Committee from October 22nd, 24th, and November 12th. A mover and seconder of those. Councillor O'Meara, thank you, and a seconder. Councillor Longo, any objection? There being none, Councillor O'Meara's motion carries, and those are received. Now, if 2 of us would move us into Committee of the Whole, Councillor Lischina and Councillor Dudek, thank you. Any objection? There being none, that carries, and we are now in the relaxed rules of the Committee of the Whole, where we no longer need seconders for our motions. Now, we have 3 public consents and 2 confidential consent items. Councillor Adams.
I have a quick question on item 8.2, but I'll give you a motion for all 3 of them. On 8.2, I just wondered if staff could comment on, is there a way by which members of the public could see what concerns or complaints have come in on municipal right-of-way issues? So I'm thinking of, we've got online our active building permits, tree permits, and all kinds of other things by way of maps. And I'm wondering if there's a way of people knowing if there's a complaint about, I don't know, a road cut that needs to be repaired or some other activity on the road that ought to be responded to.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of seeing the content of the complaints, no, the public would not have access to that.
What about location? So I'm thinking of, we've had cases where we've had contractors take over a street and neighbors don't know whether there's a permit for the use or not.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of finding out whether there's a permit, we do have a permit map that is available for the public through the town's website.
Does it cover street use permits? I know there's things that cover building permits or development application permits, but does it include use of the right-of-way?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, not the road permits activities, no.
Okay, so that's what I'm getting at, is the use of the municipal right-of-way.
That's right. So those are not available to the public unless they inquire about
So
specific
there has
locations.
to be an ask. Okay.
Correct.
I see Director Stevens is there, perhaps with more information.
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So as Lily mentioned, those permits are not yet visible on a map to the public, but we are looking at ways to bring our right-of-way permits online through a portal for better ability to apply for those, make that streamlined. And with that, we can be reviewing what information can be best made available to the public as a step through that process.
Okay, great. I appreciate that effort at transparency. Thank you.
Director Stevens or Lily, as the case may be, until that measure is in place, can people contact Service Oakville and register the question and get gotten back to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is a great way for folks to ask those questions. That way we can also track where they're coming from,
Okay.
and the residents can track their responses. So yes, please, I would encourage that.
Okay, because I'm planning to do that tomorrow because somebody made a horrible road cut on White Oaks that I ran over this evening. And it's like they didn't fill it in all the way. It's really bad. So thank you for that. Councillor Haslett-Teal.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Burton. In the policy on 8.2, it says at 1A, place equipment or materials of any kind upon or within a municipal right-of-way. So we've had a discussion about being able to play. Will basketball nets be allowed on the municipal right-of-way if they are moved as required or temporarily placed there?
Through you, Mayor Burton, when we brought the sports activities report to council earlier this year, we were given some items to report back on, and we will be doing that in the second quarter of next year. So until that report is done, the provisions within the municipal right-of-way bylaw relating to sports activities are unchanged, but we do have that report back to come to council in the first half of next year to address those items from that previous report.
So consideration will be given to whether basketball nets can be placed there in that report. I just want to be clear because this was one of the sections that the residents have been told was a problem for them.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that was one of the things we did here at that meeting, so it is on our list to report back on.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor. Director Stevens, do I remember correctly that your information at the time was that your policy is not to go out and remove these basketball nets unless there was a complaint, that you basically had a complaint-driven way of dealing with these? Is that accurate or not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, our enforcement is complaint-driven when it comes to sports equipment within the right-of-way.
Thank you. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I had a quick question on 8.2 as well in terms of items placed in, on, or around the boulevard. Irrigation systems would be part of that is not allowed, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Irrigation systems not permitted in the right-of-way.
I'm sure a number of us receive calls on an ongoing basis whenever we do road work, curb work, or our municipal service providers are digging up boulevards. They would like us to pay for the repairs. Would it be possible to come back at some point in terms of a way of trying to help people understand what can and is their responsibility versus what is our responsibility, perhaps working with the commercial installers to ensure that it's on their contracts, or they let residents know what may happen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the municipal right-of-way bylaw is supported by a number of procedures, and in those procedures, it would explain what is permitted and what isn't, and we can certainly promote that on our website and inform the public.
Thank you for that. And in terms of light pollution on the other report, I'm confused between the light pollution guidelines and how we're going to promote them, yet they aren't enforceable. Yet the report speaks to the ability to angle lights in a downward manner so it doesn't interfere with outdoor living areas, etc.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Director Campbell's going to come up and assist with that question.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. I think that's the next item on the agenda, but happy to speak to that
8.1.
So, oh, sorry, yeah, the same, different report though. So certainly with as far as the outdoor living areas, we are going to be looking at that, or certainly proposed before you tonight, is that idea of an outdoor living area. Because we were having difficulty under the previous bylaw saying that there was a zero tolerance for that light casting over the property line. So this gives us that happy medium between being reasonable and what's enforceable as far as having sort of a minimum level of light transfer and then prohibiting that which would interfere with someone's use of their property.
So a light glowing from a distant backyard is one thing. High-powered LED lights 30, 50 feet away will be viewed as somewhat differently and enforceable, right?
Through your worship, anything that would interfere with that outdoor living space would be enforceable, yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Haslett-Deal.
Sorry, I had two follow-ups on 8.2. First of all, the reason I asked the question is because there was a complaint, and that's why it was important for me to make sure that we're looking at the basketball nets. My second is, if somebody parks their car at the bottom of their driveway, their wheels are not on the sidewalk and their wheels are not on the road, that's allowed?
Through you, Your Worship. So boulevard parking is prohibited throughout the town. We do have a number of circumstances where municipal enforcement would not enforce boulevard parking, other cases where we would. So if there's a shared driveway, we would enforce boulevard parking. If it was too close to an intersection where it's interfering with sight lines, we would enforce boulevard parking. If the vehicle is parked within that driveway apron and their tires are up on the grass or up on a portion of paved right-of-way that would otherwise is not considered the driveway, so it's past that curb cut, that would also be enforced as boulevard parking.
Okay, all right, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thanks, everybody. I'll call the vote on consent items 8.1, 2, and 3. Anybody in objection? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. Councillor Adams' motion carries. We have two confidential consent items. Is there a desire to go into camera for either of these? If there is, I'll move them to the end of the meeting, but it seems to me these reports are self-explanatory. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Worship. I would like a verbal update on the labor relations issue at the end, if that's possible. Thank you.
All right. So I'm just going to move it down to the end so that we don't go in and out of camera or several times. And that brings us to our 8 public discussion items and our 2 confidential discussion items. And the first one is the 2024 Audit Planning Report. And we have staff prepared to introduce this and a presentation from our auditors, KPMG. We're in your hands now.
Sorry, apologies. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to introduce the KPMG team who will walk through the 2024 Audit Planning Report that's before you tonight for receipt. KPMG will discuss the key aspects of their audit, which in 2024 includes the implementation of 3 new accounting standards that the town is required to adopt for year-end. As management, we continue to work through the implications of these new standards, but are confident we'll have them fully assessed before the audit field work begins. At this time, I'll turn the presentation over to Matt Sardelli, who's the audit senior manager, and Carlos Alvarez, who's the audit partner on the engagement. And sorry, they are virtual, so if
Yes, can everybody hear me?
We can. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe we had Carlos on as well. I'm not sure if he's having some technical difficulties, so I will kick off while we wait to get him on the screen. If we could go ahead just a couple of pages in the package, we'll begin on the audit highlights page, page 4 of our report. For those that have seen our report in the past, you'll find this very consistent year over year in terms of our audit plan. What you see on the screen here is a little bit of a snapshot or summary of our entire report. Some key items to draw attention to: materiality disclosed here, which we'll speak to in a little bit more detail in a couple of slides. There have been some changes to the audit plan in relation to those 3 upcoming accounting standards that those in the public sector are required to implement this year. Jade made mention of those, and we will go into a little bit more detail on a subsequent slide as well. Otherwise, on the right-hand side of the page here, you'll see some areas of focus, again, to be profiled in further detail. Each of these is consistent year over year. I'll mention now that we haven't identified any significant changes or unusual transactions that would change the risk profile of the town from our point of view as auditors. So with that, I'll ask to turn the slide one more time and speak to materiality in more detail. What you see on this slide here is just a little bit of background. Again, nothing has changed in our world as auditors in terms of how we're required to compute materiality. If we go to page 6, you can see a year-over-year summary. We are planning to calculate materiality at 2.5% or 2.75%, I should say, of the total revenue benchmark. We do base that on the prior period actuals, so you can see the comparatives year over year. Something that I will call out is that our allowable range as auditors goes from 0.5 to 3% of that benchmark. Consistent with the past, we are near the top end of the range, but have not gone all the way to 3%. Pause there, I see a hand.
Thank you. While we're on this page, so on the slide before you mentioned the materiality is made up of quantitative and qualitative factors. This slide speaks to the quantitative. What would be some examples of qualitative factors, and what percentage would account for the materiality number? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor. Through you, Your Worship, some of the qualitative factors that we would consider as auditors are governance structure, the strength of the control environment at the organization subject to audit, strength and knowledge of the finance team, and other one-time items, such as accounting standard changes that may be more significant than those we're seeing this year. All of those would be considered essentially the less strong those control environments and skill sets are, the more risk we would see as auditors, which would point us in the direction of considering a lower materiality figure within that allowable range. The other item I will note on this materiality page, we do have what's called a audit misstatement posting threshold that you can see in the bottom right. That is approximately 5% of the total materiality figure. So consistent with the past, we will present any findings individually or in aggregate above that much smaller threshold to you during our audit findings report. Moving on. So slide 7, we will go into a little bit more detail on some of those upcoming standard changes. As Jade mentioned earlier, we have been working with management and are discussing the potential impact. We consider it unlikely that the second and third in the box on the top right will have material impact on the town. Those relate to very specific transactions relating to the purchase of intangible assets from a third party arm's length entity and a public-private partnership, which would certainly be an unusual and large transaction should any entity enter into one. We don't expect those to have material impact upon adoption. The first on revenue, public sector 3400, does create some guidance within the public sector for certain revenue streams, which would have been covered by more generalized guidance in the past. So again, unlikely to have a significant impact, but there may be some smaller revenue streams that do need to be considered. So we'll continue to work with management, and I will reiterate management's comments. We expect to have those discussions completed well before we return to conduct the year-end audit fieldwork. I'll mention at the bottom, no significant auditing standard changes that would require us to take a different approach. So again, much of the content in our audit plan will be consistent year over year moving forward in our presentation. Moving to the next slide, please. What you see on here is the scope of the various audits that we will perform for the town and its related entities, certainly starting at the top with the consolidated audit, and then various other audit reports for entities under town control. No change year over year in the scope. And at the bottom, you will see that from time to time, we are approached by management to perform special audit reports over certain funded programs or grants. Those are on an as-needed basis based on the reporting requirements within those funding agreements. So no change at this time to bring to your attention year over year. Moving to the next slide, please. Our risk assessment summary, again, not to sound like a broken record, is consistent year over year. No significant changes, no new areas that would not have been in focus that have risen to that level in the current period. A couple of things to draw attention to. In prior periods, asset retirement obligations would have been a more heavy area of focus. Given that was a recent standard change that was required to be implemented within the past several periods. That has since become baseline, and the requirement for management to adjust that estimate each year end after the initial year of adoption is not significantly difficult. As you can imagine, the majority of new capital assets being built or acquired would not be expected to carry such retirement obligations, so it is a relatively simple piece of work, so it is no longer profiled as a significant area of scope, although we will look at it. At the top, you'll see two presumed risks. These must be considered by us as auditors in each and every audit we perform, regardless of the size or complexity of the organization. The first, management override of control, is not rebuttable and must be addressed as a significant risk in each audit. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail on the next slide. But what I do want to point out is the next one, revenue recognition. That is a presumed risk of fraud that, again, we must consider as auditors. However, we do have the ability to rebut that presumption of a significant fraud risk which we have and continue to do for the town's audit based on the nature of its primary and material revenue streams. It's very straightforward for us as auditors to get strong third-party audit evidence over material revenue streams, so certainly an area of focus, but not one that we view with a significant fraud risk attached to it. Moving to the next slide, please. I mentioned that we would go into a little bit more detail. So the management override of controls is that non-rebuttable significant risk we must address. As auditors, our professional standards require us to design the audit with certain elements of unpredictability each year. So even though we are looking at similar areas by nature, we will take a different sampling approach or perform a different procedure to make the audit a little bit less predictable. We also do testing over specific journal entries and year-end adjustments, which would be subject to more direct judgment by management, as well as any other areas within the financial statements subject to significant estimation. So the retirement obligation or post-employee benefits, items that are typically representative of future liabilities but presented in current day dollars, we do have a requirement to take a deep dive into those areas, which we will continue to do. I won't speak to the next three slides, 11, 12, or 13 in significant detail. They are available if you want to get a little bit more flavor as to the audit procedures will apply in these specific areas, but again, very consistent year over year. So those who are familiar with our previous reports will not see significant change in how we plan to audit these areas of focus. I'm not sure if we have Carlos back. I'm just looking at our panel. Doesn't look like, so I'll continue on.
Carlos is with us.
There we go. I will pass it on in that case. Thank you, Carlos.
Good evening, and sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm getting used to the new equipment in our new Oakville office. Moved in today, so hopefully everyone can hear me now. So just thank you, Matt, for the great job. In terms of our communications with you as council, it's very important for us to have a two-way form of communication. And with respect to the topic of fraud, and layering on the comments about management override of controls, throughout the audit process, certainly if council is aware of anything that would be considered concerning from their point of view, certainly you have a direct line to myself as the audit partner with the ultimate responsibility for signing the audit report. Certainly, we do encourage council to ask management questions around, how does management ensure that there is a strong control environment in place? We will ask questions when we present the audit findings report to you as council, when we present the results in May of 2025. Just in terms of, the completeness around related party transactions, as an example, or if any councillors are aware of any alleged or actual fraud that may have occurred. So these questions certainly we present to you today, but certainly during the audit process, if you are aware of any things that are considered concerning, by all means, let me know throughout the audit process. With that, we can move forward. An additional slide, please. Again, we do expect to follow similar timelines as to what we would have conducted in the prior year, with the eventual meeting at the end of May or early June to present the audit findings. Moving forward, one more slide, please. Just in terms of audit quality, we continue to evolve our audit approach, and certainly we do have some new tools that we are excited as accountants to implement as part of the 2024 audit. So we'll continue to work on innovating the audit process. Moving along in the report, just in terms of independence, it's always important for your auditors to talk about independence. This is a cornerstone of our profession. I can confirm to all of you as members of council that up to today, we remain independent. We do have a robust system internally to ensure that we are not providing any services that would threaten our independence. And we will maintain those controls on a go-forward basis. Moving along further in the report, our plan is not to go through each of the appendices in any significant detail. Again, from a technology standpoint, we will continue to evolve how we do the audit. Matt would have already covered the new accounting standards. There is one new auditing standard that pertains to group audits. And because your financial statements are labeled as consolidated, that does mean that you are a group audit. But essentially, we do not feel that that new auditing standard will have a significant impact on you as a town. So that would cover what I would call the formal topics that we would like to discuss with you as part of the 2024 audit plan.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the presentation. I'll hazard a question in the absence of any other. Are we foreseeing a period of what I'll call accounting standard stability for a while? I mean, for the last few years, we've had new standards kind of piling up on us. And I do know stability is good, when you're trying to run an organization and keep track of everything. What's your forecast for accounting standards weather?
So we think that if this was the weather system, there are some clouds on the horizon. If I think of two things, number one, the impacts of climate change and sustainability. In the summer of 2023, on a global basis, there were new standards that were implemented on sustainability and how to capture climate risks and sustainability in your financial statements. Right now, today, some of those concepts are optional. We do believe that in years to come, those new standards will be codified, and they may result in you having to do something different as it pertains to your financial statements. The second biggest item, which is related, is on capturing the value of all of your natural assets. And when I use the term natural assets, the easiest example is to think about all of the forests, trees that you have in all of your parks, and all of your other areas within the town. There is active work today that is exploring on how you capture that asset in your financial statements. So these are pretty big standards that are very involved. And unfortunately, we believe that these will result in changes within the next 5 years.
Sounds like that last one sounds like an expensive one to track. Councillor Chisholm.
Through you, Your Worship, my thoughts exactly how we value our natural assets and what are those standards and how they are set would be extremely difficult. Can you give me an example of how we value in relation to a natural asset on a dollar value? Is that how it's going to come about?
For you, Your Worship, I think the thought is when you value something that has value, you have to look at sort of opportunity costs. Back to the example of the trees and the forests. How much carbon does that exist? Does that help with in terms of assisting with reducing your carbon footprint? Some municipalities have more of that asset than others. So those municipalities that have more, arguably, would have an asset that has a higher value. And certainly, there are ways that you can value the amount of carbon capture, for example, and compare that within municipalities. So there will be a lot of judgments and a lot of estimation involved, but certainly we believe that this is where the industry is going.
So would it safe to say in a measurement with respect to greenhouse gases, if we reduce our tonnage, there is a quotient or a quotient or a value to that?
For you, your worship, yes, we believe that, each tree, that is planted and that is of a certain size will have a dollar amount that is ascribed to the value of that tree to you as a municipality.
Wow.
And Matt and I certainly will not be tagging trees within your municipal boundaries, but certainly we expect to have ways of estimating how many you do have, and then what that translates into a value. And I'm just using the trees as an example because I think that's one that people can see and touch.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. We did do a tree inventory with the University of Toronto a number of years ago in order to set up our urban forestry management plan. So it's not like it's something we never thought of before. It's just an interesting ongoing bit of work. Councillor Chisholm, would you like to move the receipt of this information? Thank you very much. Is there any objection? There being none, Madam Clerk, Councillor Chisholm's motion carries. The next is the noise bylaw review, the amendments to the proposed noise bylaw. Council, is there a mover for this? Councillor Chisholm, thank you. Is there an Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've received some correspondence on this afternoon from a resident inquiring about fireworks, equating the noise bylaw with fireworks. The firework bylaw is coming before us in Q1 of next year. Just a quick question of staff, whether that would, her concern would be brought up in that report that's coming forward.
Through you, Your Worship. Thank you for that question. Yes, we did receive that correspondence today, and we would consider that as part of our fireworks bylaw review.
Great, thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. On a similar note, there was a piece of correspondence from Mr. Winston Mark, and I think staff provided some comments by way of email earlier, and I just wanted to ensure that that information had been circulated accordingly. I wanted to make sure that Mr. Mark was aware of that, should he be watching, and I suspect that it's going to require some further discussion at a later date, should there be particular matters that are of concern. I wondered if our staff would be able to explain the way in which we would deal with backyard noise and the lot line issues. And while you're up, if you could help us understand the difference between 55 and 50 dBA, and the relative level of noise between a backyard fence and a backyard wall, I guess it would be.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So as I explained to the resident, he did identify that there may be a difference the way we're measuring from 55 to 50, 55 being at the property line and 50 being measured 10 feet off the back wall of a house in the central part of that property. So given the difference, arguably saying 40 feet from where the fence is to that measurement point that we've now established, it's probably going to be close to being 50, being similar. It might be 49, it might be 51, depending on the difference of the distance between that line. But what we're trying to establish here is that by making that, I made the point earlier to the resident that by establishing a consistent point on the property for us to take that measurement, it means that every resident has the same measurement volume opportunity that every other resident does. Because if we have people who have large properties, they are biased favorably by having a 55 measurement at a property line, where someone who has like a 30-foot lot has the same 55 decibel limit, but where they receive that property near their patio would be much higher. And so it's unreasonable for someone's property to establish what the limit is for every resident in town. So we've tried to establish a consistent threshold of 50 dB from the same point off everyone's property, 10 feet off the back of the wall of the house, central to their property. And that also gives the resident who wants to play music the same opportunity to have music played at a reasonable level on their property and not have someone, just to give you an example, if someone is 200 feet away and they come down to the bottom of their property, can barely hear the music back by their house, but show up and say, okay, I want you to take a measurement from my fence line, 200 feet away from my house. And I'm like, well, that seems unreasonable given you can't hear it from where you're sitting at your patio. Well, that's what the bylaw says, take it from the property line. And so we would be then applying this in an unreasonable way. It doesn't make sense to have that reading taken from the fence line when those fence lines vary throughout town. So we're trying to provide a clear, consistent measurement tool in the middle of the property. It's the same thing that will be applied for air conditioner units, pool pumps, everything that is surrounding that point. So it's not just music. But music, for some reason, didn't follow the provincial guidelines of 50 decibel. For some reason, when our engineer set that up in 2008, he made this arbitrary call using 55 decibel as a threshold. I don't know where he ever got it from. And he also arbitrarily chose the property line in that case, which isn't the guideline. The guideline is supposed to be on the property.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I think that lays it out much better.
Okay.
Councillor Chisholm.
Through you, Your Worship, just a comment to thank the staff for the listening to the Kerr Street BIA, and I would assume the other BIAs, Bronny and downtown, with respect to increasing by 3 hours the music to 50 decibels is really acceptable. So overall, I'm speaking on behalf of the Kerr Street BIA. They're quite pleased with the report, and a special thank you to staff for listening to their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Thank you also for moving the item. Is there any objection to Councillor Chisholm's motion? Madam Clerk, there is none, and that carries. The next is 10.3, the Oakville Marine Search and Rescue relocation and 2 Navy Street update. Is there a motion for this? Councillor O'Meara? Thank you. Is there an objection to Councillor O'Meara's motion? Madam Clerk, seeing none, that is carried. Thank you, everybody. The next is 10.4, the Public Notice and Engagement Policy Procedure Update. Is there a motion for this? Councillor Shi, thank you. Any, Councillor Haslett-Deal?
Through you, Mayor Burton. I do have some questions about the Public Notice and Engagement Policy Procedure. In the actual policy itself, it is suggesting that council will be informed at the same time as the public. So can you help me understand further why we are making a change and in terms of informing councillors in advance of the public about what's happening?
Through the mayor to the councillor. So there's different reasons for that. The change in the procedure is really to provide additional clarity. For some types of projects or studies that we do, it is typical that staff would give a councillor a heads up to say something is coming before council for consideration. Typically, the actual formal notice, we want to be careful of when that goes out, that it's one date. And that's because we want to avoid challenges from the community in terms of any confusion that would be raised of notice maybe circulating before formal notice to the entire town has gone out. We also want to make sure that we're not challenged if we go to the board or LPAT or whatever it is in terms of not having a consistent formal notice. So there's some version control issues that we want to make sure that we're consistent with. In terms of other types of matters pertaining to, say, development applications, and I'll defer to our Director of Planning if he's here, is those types of processes are informed by legislated requirements and timelines. So in those instances, it might be more difficult for staff to provide that heads up to council. But typically for those larger projects, we will strive to do that. And also for some medium to large scale projects, as part of the plan to initiate those projects, we typically do have a communications plan or an engagement plan. And those are shared with council and the public in advance, or once we've prepared those, so that
you know, even if it's rough timelines, those are usually set out so that you know when things are coming. So I'm not sure if that helps at all.
Well, I still have a concern that, so I understand from a formal public, you know, this officially, you know, says we've accepted this application or it's a complete application. I understand that. But where does it affirm a protocol that we've followed since I've been on council, and certainly some of us have advocated that we've fallen off on a few occasions on doing it, making sure that the local ward councillor is informed, not just about planning applications, but it's an important piece of it. Our residents expect us to understand and be ahead of the curve, not behind, or at the same spot. And I'm not seeing language in here that reaffirms that staff have a commitment to keep us informed about things that are happening. I'll give you a great example. The region met with Councillor Giddings and I last week and took the time to walk us through their plan and their thinking on how to address the Trafalgar Road sewer and water main changes. Giving us that heads up allowed us to engage in a discussion, make sure that we had some clarity of where there could be some hiccups. It was incredibly valuable. I'm not seeing anything here that assures us that we are going to receive in advance this level of information. And I think it's critical to us doing our jobs.
Through the mayor to the councillor, I think what we can do in the procedure is include language that speaks to when we're starting, and it might already be there, but I can go back and check, when we're starting to launch a program or a project, that there is that engagement or notification at the onset. And I think it does speak to having some preliminary discussions similar to what we did before we started the update to this policy, to engage with councillors on kind of some of those types of projects. So we can include that in the procedure to make it clear that there is that engagement. Again, on the planning application side, that might be subject to some different requirements because of the time frame for which they work in.
So I appreciate that as a suggestion, but it could, and I would hope that this conversation and encourages to strengthen that procedure. Could we not be advised from a like a confidential memo on these formal notices? Like, is that unreasonable to ask? If you're worried about us getting the information, or we've been living under an NDA, so could we not on this notice part just receive it in confidence in advance?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may, Councillor, are we speaking specific to development applications at this point? And maybe I can help out in that sense.
Well, so the language says public notice. So planning and development has those public notices. If somebody'd like to fill in what other public notices we wouldn't benefit from having advance notice of. Listen, I'm open to hearing that, but I'd like to have some assurance that I'm not going to be surprised. I've lived with some surprises over the last 6 years, and it's not good for trust and relationships with our constituents.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mr. Mayor. As it relates to those broader town projects, as Ms. Khan was saying, we will obviously do everything that we can to make sure council is well aware of the types of projects that we're working on. So by way of example, with those that we're working on right now, for example, on policy projects, we do ensure that council is well aware, and specifically the ward councillors are well aware of how we're progressing through a particular project before it lands on the council table. Where it comes to the development applications, it's a little bit trickier to get those notices out. Yes, we will get an application. We have 30 days within which we are required to deem an application complete or incomplete, following which we have 15 days to provide that notice. That notice has to be pulled together and sent out to our commenting departments and agencies. At that exact same time, we provide that notice to the ward councillors. The reason we do it that way is because we need to have the website built, and it takes us time to verify that everything in all the information that's on the website is correct, and then we have a link that we can then provide to council, because there's no doubt that council will want to see the plans that come forward with those applications. So it becomes a little bit tricky from a timing perspective to make sure we get that out. Once we receive that application, the reason we don't provide a notice right at that time is that we need those 30 days within which to determine, is that application in fact complete? We're not going to let others know that an application has come in if in fact it's not complete. It could sit for a few months before we actually deem it complete. There might be things missing. It could be fees, it could be plans, et cetera. So once we know that it's complete, then we absolutely get that notice out as fast as we can. There's legislative timeframe within which we have to make recommendations to council, and that for council to make that decision. We don't want to waste any time doing that. So it happens at a fairly quick sequence of when we get that notice out to the ward councillors.
So thank you for that detail. And I understand on the planning side the trigger timeframes, and you need that time frame. And with, I think, minor exception, I think there've been a couple where, you know, we're generally well apprised that this application is now in play. I'm just concerned that, for example, there was an example of economic development had discussions that would impact Ward 3. We weren't given notice of that for quite some time, and yet it was substantive. So I'm just looking at the policy saying, is the procedure going to be what governs, that we are to be informed, so that staff knew and you know, continuing understand that that's an expectation that we have?
Thank you for that, and through you, Mr. Mayor. That's a great example that we'll certainly take back to make sure that we're scrutinizing those various projects that we have, and we are keeping council well informed. As it relates to the procedure, I'll let Ms. Khan speak to that.
Through the mayor to the councillor, yes. So we can add the wording in it would be the procedure that indicates that for projects that there is a communication to councillors to inform them of whatever that intention is. So it may not still be the formal notice, but it will be some sort of communication to say what the plan is to execute the notice.
Okay, I'll leave it there. I've got some colleagues lining up.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I mean, Parks and Rec does a great job when they're going to send out letters to neighbors who have garbage or gardens in the backyard. They said, hey, this notice is about to go out. Let you know. Let us know if you're going up. When we've got traffic calming, our town partners in traffic say, hey, this is the notice we're about to give out. Let us know if you got any. I think we need to streamline that. And again, where it is not legislatively dictated by the province, then that is a rule, but all of the rules should fall under the same. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to move a deferral back to staff to get this in writing so that we can look at it and make sure it is all aligned so that we're all under the same rules. What is not provincially legislated that we should do is one thing, but anything that is not, again, those are minimums, and we can always accept better than minimums at the town. So I would like to see that, and I would move deferral on this back to staff to come back with the wording and the corrections on what it is I think councillors are looking for in terms of clarity about what messaging is going out to the residents before, so we understand what's happening. So when we get that dirge of information, we're prepared for that, and we understand what has been communicated to staff in our wards. Again, not townwide, but even ward-wide. So I'd move that deferral.
Thank you, Councillor. It's not debatable, although is there an objection to Councillor O'Meara's motion of deferral? I've got one objection. It's close, but deferral carries. Madam CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just seeking a little bit of clarity in terms of what are the expectations of council. What I heard, and I just want to test it out, is that we will be looking at updates to the procedures to ensure that council, particularly on local issues, will have and I'll say heads up that that the notices will be going out to the public so that they know ahead of time with the information that's provided. There is, and if that's the clarity, then
I would restate it. Council wants to know as much in advance of the public as possible where permitted by law.
Okay. All right,
And,
thank you.
And I phrase it that way because I think it's important for us to remember that council makes decisions, not councilors. Okay? So the deferral carried, the instructions are clear, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. You contributed to a quicker meeting. 10.5, the 2026 municipal election preparation report. Is there a mover for this? Councillor Duddick, thank you. Council, is there an objection to Councillor Duddick's motion? Madam Clerk, seeing none, that carries. Thank you, Councillor. Now we come to 10.6, 2025 council appointments. Council, I polled you. You have in your material the results of that polling. I'm searching for a mover to appoint, thank you, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Giddings, who volunteered to the Accessibility Advisory Committee, Councillors Chisholm, Hazardale, Grant, Shea, and Elgar to the Appeals Committee and Property Standards, where 5 are required, Councillors Giddings and McNeese to the Oakville Heritage Committee, where 2 are required, and Councillor Lischina to OMSAR, where 1 is required. Is there any objection to Councillor Knoll's motion? Madam Clerk, there's no objection. Councillor Knoll, thank you for your motion. It's carried. We now come to 10.7, the Integrity Commissioner's Periodic Report 2024 and Revised Council Code of Conduct. And I have a request for an amendment to this from Councillor O'Meara and Councillor McNeese. Councillor O'Meara, your request is sufficient. We don't need a seconder. He wants, under Section 2, gifts and benefits, after the first sentence, to add, this includes travel and accommodation provided by third parties unless prior approval by council is granted. And so that would be the first vote, and discussion is open on that. Councillor O'Meara, did you want to speak to it?
No, just it took me back to a number of years ago where numerous people were going on agencies of the Chinese government for chambers of commerce and a number of things, and I know Toronto and Ottawa and a number of other municipalities have taken up this kind of language just to ensure prudent judgment and integrity and transparency are included in travel and gifts and stuff. So I thought that would be an added benefit to us being leaders in transparency and openness. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. I would just ask if you think that would be an appropriate amendment for the region's code, which we adopted last month.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the region is on shutter moment in terms of economic development and those sorts of things that we're seeing now, planning a bunch of things. So I think, the brush and flush stuff of the region might be different from where municipalities are seeing economic development and business development and these sorts of things, which might differentiate us from the work that the region does. So, we can open this up anytime at the region, but as a town, I think we're going to see more and more of this and less of it at the regional level, hence why I think it was important to bring it up here.
I don't doubt the importance. I just wonder if you would support doing the same thing at the region.
Sure. Yeah, always happy to do that. It's, happy to refer back to the region for reconsideration.
Thank you, Councillor Adams.
Well, I'm sorry, I think you may have already dealt with my question of the motion, because I wasn't quite sure what Councillor O'Meara meant by the term brush and something or other, brush and flush, what he was referring to exactly there, because in my opinion, if you do it here, you ought to do it there too, so.
All right, well, I'll call the vote then. I see no other hands. Is there any objection to the amendment? Madam Clerk, I see no objection. The amendment carries. Do we have a mover for the main body? Councillor O'Meara, thank you. Is there an objection? No objection is seen, and it's carried. Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. The next is 10.8, a not previously listed Midtown Transit-Oriented Community Update. This is a public report. Are you satisfied with the report? Do you want to move it? You don't want to move it? Do you want to ask questions? Councillor Adams is moving it, and I'll ask if there are any objections. Seeing none, that's carried. Thank you, Councillor Adams. We now have a confidential staff report, 11.1, concerning the 2 Navy Street restaurant RFP cancellation. I think the report is sufficient. Is there a member of council who'd like to move it? Councillor Haslett-Deal, thank you. Any objection? No, there being none, that's carried. We also have a confidential TOC update. I would suggest to you that there's no new information there, and the report is ample. Is there a desire to pass that now and consider it received, or do you want to go into camera for it? Councillor Chisholm is moving it. Councillor Haslett-Deal?
I do have a question on some of the images that were in the report and access to seeing them. So I don't necessarily have a legal question, but there are some slides that I have never seen, and I'd like to kind of know the source of them. Would you like to go in camera for that, or?
Well, is that a question you can ask by email and receive, and we could all receive the answer?
Well, it's on a confidential document, so I thought I had to ask it in this forum.
Well, you can ask the source of the, I think, we'll put it in the hands of the solicitor. Can she not ask the source of the images, or, I tell you what, maybe it's easier to just go into camera for the thing. After all, we've got to go into camera for the confidential labor relations update. And if that's the case, does that satisfy you?
Yes.
Then perhaps I could get a motion. Oh, I don't need one. There are no advisory committee minutes. So I'm just checking to see if there's anything else for the public. Under new business. Yeah, no, I know. Let me get the other public things. So under new business, we had a notice of motion by Councillor Haslett-Deal and Councillor Duddock. Would you like to take that up at this time for the benefit of the public? Councillor Haslett-Deal?
Thank you, Mayor Burton. As we all know, having sustainable, predictable funding is critically important for our planning, and yet we continue to not have that, with minor exception of the Canada Community Building Fund. And it continues to be difficult for us to plan, and we have growing gaps between the cost of infrastructure and development charges, and we continue to have requirements to grow, and we all embrace that we need to grow. This is a similar motion that is passed in other municipalities, requesting that the provincial government and the federal government consider a portion of the land transfer or property transactions, if you will, be directed to municipalities to assist us with local infrastructure needs. You have the notice of motion in front of you. I think it's really just speaking to what other municipalities and most of us have been saying all along. Predictable, sustainable funding is an appropriate way for us to do asset management, to do infrastructure management, and this is one tool that's in the provinces and the Fed's toolkit that could assist us without burdening a new tax burden on our residents and home buyers, which none of us would like to have happen. So I put it before you and hope that you'll support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duddock?
Ditto.
Quickest speech of the evening. Is there an objection to the motion? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, that is carried. And Council, if you would favor me with a motion to waive the procedure bylaw to consider this matter tonight. Councillor Longo, thank you. Any objection? There being none, we'll just record it in the minutes in the proper order. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So then, we have requests for reports and pages that are stuck together. First on my list, I guess I only have one. I have one that I know of. On-street daytime parking, moved by Councillor Elgar, seconded by Councillor Longo, that staff be requested to conduct a scan of parking regulations and bylaws in other municipalities within the GTHA and report back with recommendations regarding daytime on-street parking restrictions and the current 3-hour on-street parking limit to accommodate more people working from home, multiple car families, contractors working at residence, and multiple car families managing limited driveway space. Is there any objection to this request for report? There being none, that request for report is approved, Councillor Elgar and Councillor Longo, and I think we all look forward to the results of that one. So now, we need a mover for the following motion to go into a session closed to the public for the purposes of considering, as permitted under the Municipal Act, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. This is with regard to 11.2. And, or wait, before we do that, can I call your attention to 9.1? I had set 9.1 aside when I set aside 9.2, but I don't think there's any need to go into camera on 9.1. 9.1 could be passed in public with, if anyone wanted to move, that the report advising that the town has consented to an adjournment of the district appeals be received. Councillor Dudek, thank you. Any objection? There being none, that is carried by all of us. So now, in accordance with the Municipal Act, a meeting or part of a meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered deals with litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for the purpose, information explicitly supplied in confidence to the municipality by the province, and a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. And the other reason to go into camera is for 9.2. In accordance with the Municipal Act, a meeting or part of a meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered is labor relations or employee negotiations. And my mover is Councillor Dudek.
Your Worship, I wonder if I could ask for your indulgence. I'd be happy to give you a motion to approve that, but I just wanted to use the opportunity for the public for one item.
Yes. Council, I did promise the councillor that we would, at the end of the meeting, take time for a little report on the Santa Parade and what a huge success that was. So literally, item 17, regional reports and question period regarding town boards and advisory committees and so on. Councillor Dudek, Santa's chief elf.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I want to thank our staff. Huge involvement. Every department virtually throughout the town was involved, gave of their time, many meetings, made sure everything ran smoothly. So thank you. Special thank you to Robin Howarth, who was, he just made things appear at the right time. A lot of work on his behalf, so I have to thank him and his Parks and Rec team, of course. I also wanted to thank Councillors Elgar, Hazlitt Thiel, McNeese, O'Meara, Lischina, and she actually, in addition to doing marshalling, also coordinates the carriage for Mrs. Claus, which sometimes can be somewhat of a challenge for her. And she always does it so nicely and makes sure that she's in the right time at the right place. So thank you. And of course, Councillor Z, who's going to be taking over after 10 years of filling this role. It's time to pass the torch, and I couldn't ask for a better person to follow in my footsteps. And I have a little something to help him keep focused on his lead role. And I wonder if I could ask him just to meet me so I can present it with you. Oops, to you.
You should put it on. What is it? Scott, stay here. Put it on. What is it? You're done.
Put it on. No.
Other side, let's see it. Awesome.
Well then, please do.
I just want to thank you, Cassie, for your decade service for as chair of this parade committee. So it's really remarkable. So your dedication and leadership is really remarkable and inspiring. So I'm so honored that I was chosen to be your successor. So how do you say that? So I've already learned a lot from the past. So, but make sure, not surprised if I will call you for the guidance in the future, but I will try my best to be your A+ students, to be this chair of this prayer committee. Thank you very much. Thank you for all. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Schitt is, in addition to his many other accomplishments, he's actually a real PhD, so we could be calling him Dr. Counselor. We've turned the job over to Dr. Counselor Schitt. All right, who's my mover for the in-camera session? Councillor Dudek, thank you. Any objection? There being none, that carries. Council, I recommend you take a quick 5-minute break while the well-known technological shift to a closed session is accomplished.
Recording stopped.
I'll wait for the clerk to return. All right, hello. Council has been in a session closed to the public for the reasons allowed in the Municipal Act, having to deal with subject matter being considered of labor relations or employee negotiations, and also for matters subject to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, advice subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for the purpose, information explicitly supplied in confidence to the municipality by the province, and a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. And I'm accepting a motion by Councillor O'Meara that the report from the Human Resources Department dated November 13th, 2024 be received. Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Is there any objection? Madam Clerk, there's none, so that carries. And I'm accepting a motion from Councillor Haslett-Deal that the report from the Legal Department titled Confidential TOC Update be received under 11.2 on the agenda. Is there any objection? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, that too is carried. I believe the next thing I would like is a motion to rise and report to council. And who hasn't been in the minutes yet? Councillor Elgar. Let's get Councillor Elgar in the minutes. Any objection? There's no objection to Councillor Elgar's motion. It is successful. And I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 8.1, .2, and .3, confidential consent items 9.1 and 9.2, discussion items 10.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and confidential discussion items 11.1 and 11.2, as noted by the clerk. A mover and seconder for the report would be in order now. Councillor McNeice and Councillor Grant. Thank you. And is there any objection? Madam Clerk, no objection being seen. Their motion is successful. Thank you. That, I believe, brings us to the consideration and reading of the bylaws. And for that, we need a mover and seconder. And we'll go with Councillor Nanda, and who else hasn't been on the minutes yet here? Councillor Adams, we'll take you. Is there any objection? There being no objection, that carries, and the bylaws as listed in the agenda are considered read and passed. Council, it's been terrific working with you, and your work and our work is all done now, and we can move on to our families and whatever else entertains us the rest of this evening. The meeting is over.